Warm greetings from TNV Academy. Today in this session, we are going to discuss about disaster recovery in relation to information technology. However, let us first talk about the key takeaways of this session. At the end of this session, you will be able to understand what is disaster recovery, elements of effective disaster recovery plan, how to build a disaster recovery team, types of disaster recovery, and the last one is benefits of disaster recovery. So let us now start the discussion and talk about what is disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is an organization's method of regaining access and functionality to its IT infrastructure after events like a natural disaster, cyber attack, or even business disruptions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. A variety of disaster recovery (DR) methods can be part of a disaster recovery plan. DR is one aspect of business continuity. Disaster recovery relies upon the replication of data and computer processing in an off-premises location not affected by the disaster. When servers go down because of a natural disaster equipment failure or cyber attack, a business needs to recover lost data from a second location where the data is backup. Ideally, an organization can transfer its computer processing to that remote location as well in order to continue operations. The goal of DR methods is to enable the organization to regain use of critical systems and IT infrastructure as soon as possible after a disaster occurs. To prepare for this, an organizations often perform an in-depth analysis of their systems and create a formal document to follow in times of crisis. This document is known as a disaster recovery plan. Disaster recovery focuses on the information technology (IT) or technology systems supporting critical business functions as opposed to business continuity. This involves keeping all essential aspects of a business functioning despite significant disruptive events. It can therefore be considered a subset of business continuity. Disaster recovery assumes that the primary site is not recoverable for some time and represents a process of restoring data and services to a secondary survived site, which is opposite to restoring it back to its original place. Let us now discuss the key elements of disaster recovery plan. The few important elements of a disaster recovery plan are: disaster recovery team. This assigned group of specialists will be responsible for creating, implementing and managing the disaster recovery plan. This plan should define each team member's role and responsibilities. In the event of a disaster, the recovery team should know how to communicate with each other, employees, vendors and customers. Risk evaluation. Assess potential hazards that put your organization at risk. Depending on the type of event, strategize what measures and resources will be needed to resume business. For example, in the event of a cyber attack, what data protection measures will the recovery team have in place to respond? Business critical asset identification. A good disaster recovery plan includes documentation of which systems, applications, data and other resources are most critical for business continuity, as well as the necessary steps to recover data. Backups. Determine what needs backup or to be relocated, who should perform backups and how backups will be implemented. Include a recovery point objective (RPO) that states the frequency of backups and a recovery time objective (RTO) that defines the maximum amount of downtime allowable after a disaster. These metrics create limits to guide the choice of IT strategy, processes, and procedures that make up an organization's disaster recovery plan. The amount of downtime an organization can handle and how frequently the organization backs up its data will inform the disaster recovery strategy, testing and optimization. The recovery team should continually test and update its strategy to address ever-evolving threats and business needs. By continually ensuring that a company is ready to face the worst-case scenarios in disaster situations, it can successfully navigate such challenges. In planning how to respond to a cyber attack, for example, it's important that organizations continually test and optimize their security and data protection strategies and have protective measures in place to detect potential security breaches. We will now move forward and discuss about how to build a disaster recovery team, whether creating a disaster recovery strategy from scratch or improving an existing plan. Assembling the right collaborative team of experts is a critical first step. It starts with tapping IT specialists and other key individuals to provide leadership over the following key areas in the event of a disaster. Crisis management. This leadership role commences recovery plans, coordinates efforts throughout the recovery process, and resolves problems or delays that emerge. Business continuity. The expert overseeing this ensures that the recovery plan aligns with the company's business needs based on the business impact analysis, impact assessment and recovery. The team responsible for this area of recovery has technical expertise in IT infrastructure including servers, storage, database and networks. IT applications. This role monitors which application activities should be implemented based on a restorative plan. Tasks include application integrations, application setting and configuration, and data consistency. While not necessarily part of the IT department, the following roles should also be assigned to any disaster recovery plan. Executive management. The executive team will need to approve the strategy, policies and budget related to the disaster recovery plan, plus provide input if obstacles arise. Critical business units. A representative from each business unit will ideally provide feedback on disaster recovery planning so that their specific concerns are addressed. Let us now discuss the various types of disaster recovery, which are backup. This is the simplest type of disaster recovery and entails storing data off-site or on a removable drive. However, just backing up data provides only minimal business continuity help as the IT infrastructure itself is not backed up. Cold site. In this type of disaster recovery, an organization sets up a basic infrastructure in a second, rarely used facility that provides a place for employees to work after a natural disaster or fire. It can help with business continuity because business operations can continue, but it does not provide a way to protect or recover important data. So a cold site must be combined with other methods of disaster recovery. Hot site. A hot site maintains up-to-date copies of data at all times. Hot sites are time-consuming to set up and more expensive than cold sites, but they dramatically reduce downtime. Disaster Recovery as a Service (DRaaS). In the event of a disaster or ransomware attack, a DRaaS provider moves an organization's computer processing to its own cloud infrastructure, allowing a business to continue operations seamlessly from the vendor's location, even if an organization's servers are down. DRaaS plans are available through either subscription or pay-per-use models. There are pros and cons to choosing a local DRaaS provider. Latency will be lower after transferring to DRaaS servers that are closer to an organization's location. But in the event of a widespread natural disaster, a DRaaS that is nearby may be affected by the same disaster. Backup as a service. Similar to backing up data at a remote location, With backup as a service, a third-party provider backs up an organization's data but not its IT infrastructure. Data center disaster recovery. The physical elements of data center can protect data and contribute to faster disaster recovery in certain types of disasters. For instance, fire suppression tools will help data and computer equipment survive a fire. A backup power source will help businesses sail through power outages without grinding operations to a halt. Of course, none of these physical disasters recovery tools will help in the event of a cyber attack. Virtualization. Organizations can back up certain operations and data or even a working replica of an organization's entire computing environment on off-site virtual machines that are unaffected by physical disasters. Using virtualization as part of a disaster recovery plan also allows businesses to automate some disaster recovery processes, bringing everything back online faster. For virtualization to be an effective disaster recovery tool, frequent transfer of data and workloads is essential, as is good communication within the IT team about how many virtual machines are operating within an organization. Point-in-time copies. Point-in-time copies, also known as point-in-time snapshots, make a copy of the entire database at a given time. Data can be restored from this backup, but only if the copy is stored off-site or on a virtual machine that is unaffected by the disaster. Instant recovery. Instant recovery is similar to point-in-time copies, except that instead of copying a database, instant recovery takes a snapshot of an entire virtual machine. And finally, let us now discuss the benefits of disaster recovery. Drafting a disaster recovery plan and ensuring you have the right staff in place to carry it out can have the following benefits. Minimize interruption. In the event of disaster, even if it is completely unexpected, your business can continue operating with minimal interruption. Limit damages. A disaster will inevitably cause damage, but you can control the extent of damage caused. For example, in hurricane-prone areas, businesses plan to move all sensitive equipment off the floor and into a room with no windows. Training and preparation. Having a disaster recovery program in place means your staff are trained to react in case of a disaster. This preparation will lower stress levels and give your team a clear plan of action when an event occurs. Restoration of services. Having a solid disaster recovery plan means you can restore all mission critical services to their normal state in a short period of time. Your recovery time objective RTO will determine the longest time you are willing to wait until service is restored. We have now come to the conclusion of this session. If you have any questions on what we discussed today, then please feel free to put them forward. Till we meet next, it's best wishes from TNV Academy. Thank you.